Tell us about this case, because there's a lot to this beyond simply the fate of this handful of journalists.
Absolutely. The release of the journalists is obviously extremely welcome news, but there are dozens, possibly scores more journalists in jail in Turkey. Turkey has one of the worst reputations for jailing journalists and media workers. And unfortunately, this is only the tip of the iceberg of injustice done to people who have dissenting views in Turkey. For instance, there are hundreds, possibly a couple of thousand ethnic Kurdish dissidents who have been cycled through jail or remain in jail in Turkey on very flimsy charges of supporting a terrorist group, and usually with no evidence that they've done any violent acts at all.
And yet Turkey is a democracy, and even as the Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan gets more and more popular, more powerful, it seems like it is getting riskier and riskier for his opponents to take him on.
Yes, this is not just about the Prime Minister. Of course, it's the charges range usually towards anti-state activities, and so I think that it would be unfair to put it all on his docket. But yes, there is a problem here. The Turkish Parliament is trying to deal with it by reframing the anti-terrorism laws. And indeed, the release of these journalists yesterday, I hope, is the beginning of a new look at this whole issue by the government.
Now, while this is going on inside of Turkey, beyond its borders, the country seems to be accumulating more influence and more respect, both in its region and in the West as well.
And that's exactly why Turkey needs to look to its democratic credentials, because if you look at the most recent polls about why the Middle East thinks that Turkey is a model worth emulating, mostly it's about democracy, about Turkey having achieved a situation where, for instance, the Prime Minister, for all his faults, will one day leave his job and retire and remain in Turkey. This is very unusual in the Middle East. He is elected in free and open elections, and most recently the Prime Minister was elected with 50% of the vote, which is extraordinary, and no one questioned the legitimacy of this. So it's absolutely clear that Turkey must do much more on this subject, and ironically, it's nothing to do with the Middle East that Turkey's made progress insofar as it has. This has been mostly to do with its convergence with the European Union, a process that unfortunately has slackened, if not stalled, in the last few years. And that is one of the reasons, unfortunately, that we've gotten to the situation where we have all these hundreds of people unjustly in jail.
Now, the head of the CIA, David Petraeus, was in Turkey this week for meetings with figures including Prime Minister Erdogan. What do you think was on the agenda?
Syria, and then Syria, I think. This is an incredible, difficult dilemma for people in Turkey and, of course, for U.S. policy as well. And it's clear that the U.S. is trying its best to harmonize its policies on Syria with Turkey, which has a 900-kilometer border with Syria and has lots of links to that country.
Now, this is one of the extraordinary things about Erdogan, is he was an ally of Bashar al-Assad. His close and harmonious relations with Syria were a big part of his foreign policy, and yet he has turned. He's done a complete about-face, remarkably courageous, given his place in the region, turning his back on an old friend.
Well, old friend is pitching it a little high. I think Turkey's only been a friend of Syria since 1999. Before then, Syria was more or less a sworn enemy of Turkey under the Assad dynasty, as it was previously. Things change in this part of the world. I think that the government here in Turkey has been shown to be somewhat idealistic, if not a little naive, in its approach to Syria and the whole region, and for the best of reasons. Turkey 2-3 years ago truly believed that it could create a functioning system of nation states in the Middle East through various policy dynamics, including high-level political dialogue, free travel, multilateral free trade agreements, and infrastructure integration. And it dealt with whoever it found, and it embraced, for instance, the Syrian government. And it's doubly embarrassing that they told everybody that, don't worry, we're friends of the Syrians, we can fix this, when the trouble started last year, and they were unable to fix it. And then when the Syrians changed, as you said, Bashar al-Assad just paid no attention at all. Turkey then was one of the first to say Bashar al-Assad must go. And that was months ago. He's still there. So I think, unfortunately, Turkey's really displayed the limits of what it can do. And I'd be very interested to see if the CIA director was able to find anything more Turkey could possibly do to change the situation in Syria, which is so profoundly domestic in origin.
We'll be watching.